that the powerful lobby is spreading its influence on Capitol Hill by calling for an unconditional military aid to Israel and hyping up threats from Iran, which there have never been any threats. National Harbor, Maryland. This week, approximately 1,600 foot soldiers from AIPAC congregated inside the garish yet functional Gaylord National Resort and Convention Center for the PAC's annual policy conference. It took place this year amid Israel's bloody war in Gaza, which has left at least 30,000. Well, new reports are saying over 40,000 dead, and it's turning into a critical wedge issue in the 2024 elections. Netanyahu addressed attendees by videocast along with Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Herzog.
Oh, that guy.
According to an incomplete speaker list, the entire Democratic and Republican leaderships in Congress delivered remarks. Senators Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell and Reps Hakeem Jeffries and Mike Johnson, Uncle Fester, and Tim Burchett of Tennessee were both in attendance. In past years, the conference has been a media spectacle with a widely disseminated lineup of powerful speakers to showcase AIPAC's enduring political influence. This year, however, it was locked down with few social media posts and broadcast speeches, largely because of the threat of disruptions from anti-war protests. Well, there should have been anti-war protests. The goal of this year's low-key gathering was to fire up attendees for AIPAC's 2024 agenda before sending them off to Capitol Hill to strong-arm Congress on supporting Israel.
Ugh.
The Prospect has obtained documents from the conference that preview the PAC's lobbying blitz on Capitol Hill this week. The documents reveal AIPAC's legislative strategy and talking points it will use to support unconditional $14 billion in military funding package, and thus far has been held up amongst other policy changes. They also include numerous positions on the aspects of the U.S. response to the war that has not been yet been made public, from abolishing the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in the Near East to opposing recent restrictions imposed by the Biden administration on Israeli settlers. There is no mention of a two-state solution. This is damning evidence that AIPAC is completely aligned with the far right of the Israeli government as tensions emerge between Netanyahu and the Biden administration, said Raed Jarar, advocacy director of Democracy for the Arab World Now. Though many of the policy positions are consistent with AIPAC's past advocacy, this trove of files offer a rare glimpse of the conversations the PAC holds with members of Congress behind closed doors and the arguments it's deploying. Though the primary motivation for the conference was lobbying, the event also informed members about the PAC's congressional spending plans. AIPAC has pledged to drop over $100 million on campaigns this election cycle to defeat any congressional candidates critical of Israel. This week, the PAC touted its prowess to members, dollar for dollar, the largest contributor to the candidates in the 2020 midterms via its super PAC United Democracy Project. One brochure pulls quotes from critical articles in The Intercept and Slate. Yeah, fuck Slate. as testaments to its preeminence and as an electoral juggernaut. AIPAC has long described itself as a bipartisan organization that endorses the full leadership of both parties, despite the fact that the financial disclosures show that many of its top donors overwhelmingly back GOP candidates, including Trump. Yet in 2022 and this year, almost all of AIPAC's electoral spending has come in Democratic primaries. This is a reason why leftists and progressives need to run outside of the two-party system.
Exactly.
At the conference, the lobby did not hide its slant in campaign funding. In one pamphlet given to conference attendees, the only featured Democrats were from safe blue state seats where they'd defeat more progressive anti-Israel candidates in the primary, such as Rep. Haley Stevens, Shontel Brown, and Glenn Ivey, which Shontel Brown, there more toward the end, defeated Nina Turner because of the DMFI funding.
Exactly.
The featured Republicans, however, either flipped their seats or represented highly contested frontline races held by only narrow margins. Those were Rep. Young Kim of California, Don Bacon of Nebraska, and Ken Calvert of California. It's been clear for several election cycles that AIPAC may sway the electoral map more for Republicans, but this document all signals that directly to its members. The pamphlet does try to refute charges that the lobby opposes all progressives. It takes a dig at its critics by claiming they have raised more money for endorsed Congressional Progressive Caucus members, which Joe Firestone and I have did an analysis on the CPC and all that, where they got 1.8 million, then left aligned groups, Justice Democrats, J Street, and Emily's List combined. But the talking points promoted the conference for its members to use on the Hill to tell a different story. They're exclusively directed at combating rhetoric and policy from Democrats, squad members, ceasefire advocates, and even President Biden, who has recently mildly criticized Netanyahu's handling of the war. The legislative packet is directed at defending Israel's military actions in Gaza against any calls for conditioning military assistance, as well as the findings of the ICJ investigation. AIPAC is also using the ongoing war and threat from Hamas to call for further sanctions against Iran, potentially pulling U.S. into a broader regional war, which we need to prevent.
Mm-hmm.
AIPAC is instructing members to make assertions of fact to congressional staff that are not supported by credible evidence other than the statements of the IDF, according to experts who reviewed the documents. They're going to the Hill to repeat a foreign government's talking points, said Matt Duss at the Center of International Policy, a former policy advisor to Bernie Sanders, which is a sheepdog.
Mm-hmm.
The lobby files promote the familiar. So this is more proof that our country is not infiltrated by neither China nor Russia. China and Russia have not infiltrated our country. Israel has.
Exactly.
And AIPAC is a surefire proof that we are, in fact, infiltrated by a foreign adversary.
Definitely.
It's just not the quote unquote adversary you're told to believe it is. The two countries that have never once been a threat to us, but yet they want to ban TikTok for lies and all that. The lobbying files promote the familiar, though contested, line that Israel does not target civilians, which is a lie. They have been targeting civilians since 1948.
Exactly.
This has been questioned due to the sheer body count of Palestinian civilians, women, and children during the war compared to the members of Hamas, along the statements, along with this. Yeah, this is just insane.
Mm-hmm.
State intentions by several officials to eliminate everything in Gaza. The IDF has justified the high casualty rate by saying that Hamas weaponizes civilians as human shields, yet the IDF has authorized airstrikes on these with dense civilian populations, such as hospitals and refugee camps, most recently at the Flower Massacre at the end of February, when the IDF opened fire on civilians gathered around an aid truck, killing over 100, which they're wanting us to be told that that's a lie. Everything you see and this other blah, blah, blah is a lie.
Yeah, you know what you saw.
Yeah, we know what we saw. We saw it just as clear as glass.
Exactly.
But even more controversial is that AIPAC is telling members of Congress that Israel is not blocking the delivery of aid to Gaza, which that's a lie.
Exactly. We've eyewitnessed that. We've read about it.
Eyewitness reports have witnessed all that. And reports of people that are starving in Gaza are false. Neither claim is supported by findings of international authorities nor recent actions undertaken by the U.S. government. Just last week, the U.S. dropped aid packages into Gaza, circumventing Israeli border officials. And the State of the Union address, Biden announced intentions to set up a port for deliveries. We know what that port's going to be for.
Exactly.
These actions were not only necessary because Israel has made it difficult to get aid through checkpoints, such as during one recent incident where the Israeli Navy fired at an aid convoy. The EU's foreign policy chief said that starvation in Gaza is being used as a weapon of war.
Mm-hmm.
AIPAC wants Congress to disregard not just credible international institutions, but their own eyes, and to simply take Israel's word for what's happening in Gaza in spite of the Israeli government's ongoing pattern of bullshit, said Omar Badar, a policy analyst on Middle Eastern affairs. Despite being a longtime donor and supporter of President Biden's, AIPAC's talking points also goes up on the attacks against him in recent remarks made, however, tepidly indicate a shift in tone. Biden has distanced himself from Netanyahu, embracing the language, if not the full meaning of ceasefire, or more recently indicated potential red line should Israel launch a ground invasion on the Gaza border city of Rafah. AIPAC dedicates an entire section of its file for members to rebuke the president's comments under the subhead, "Why is President Biden dictating Israel how to fight this war while simultaneously demanding military assistance from his government?" It also advises members to say concerns that conduct the war against Hamas are best delivered privately. So we know that they're trying to keep things under wraps from the public eye.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they're also wanting to ban TikTok.
Yeah.
The documents reveal numerous advocacy positions that AIPAC has not forthright about publicly. They include opposing the Biden administration's memorandum on arms sales in February, which merely asks for written assurances from countries receiving aid that they are complying with existing laws. They also oppose recent U.S. sanctions against West Bank settlers who have engaged in violence against Palestinians. AIPAC deems those measures unnecessary.
Oh,
Though
really?
AIPAC, pardon?
I was gonna say, oh, really? It's okay, for terrorism against the Palestinians from anybody.
Pretty much, that's what they're saying. Though AIPAC says it welcomes humanitarian assistance included in an emergency military package for Israel, it demands that none of that aid go through the UNRWA, even though the group has proven to be one of the most effective international vehicles for distributing assistance. That's because AIPAC is pushing for a complete defunding and abolition of UNRWA after reports by the IDF that a handful of its staffers were aiding Hamas. Hamas this, Hamas that, fuck this Hamas
And the
shit.
whole thing was false. The whole thing was false.
The IDF has not provided evidence to back up those claims. AIPAC now indicates that it's open to standalone Israeli military aid package without Ukraine aid, which is significant in tactical change, according to Dylan Williams, Vice President for Government Affairs at the Center of International Policy, who used to work for J Street. AIPAC has sought Israel to be included within a broader bill, ostensibly because the principle says rising aid lifts all boats. Yeah, you're sinking your boat, dickheads.
Exactly.
This also had the effect of insulating Israel from potential challenges or conditions. The fact that AIPAC has now shifted to accepting a standalone bill that indicate a fracturing of the foreign aid NGO coalition because of the war, it could also mean that AIPAC believes it can exert enough pressure on members to go get the votes for Israel aid set aside from the messier politics of Ukraine funding and the border bill that it was originally attached to. So every time a spending bill, it's like, let's give money to Ukraine, let's give money to Taiwan, let's give money to Israel, but let's not give shit to the American public.
Mm-hmm. What about us?
We are, none of the Biden administration or anybody in Congress's policies are American first. I think this is why we're starting to see a new rise in American nationalism because of what the Biden-Harris administration have done. Not only them, but also our members of Congress. That's why we're starting to see more people echoing the America First deal that Trump has coined because we are left behind. That's why.
Mm-hmm.
And even I am catching on to that American First deal. I'm guilty of it because I am so sick and tired of seeing my neighbors and people in my community struggle while all these other countries are being given everything with a golden spoon.
Mm-hmm. And there's no reason for it.
Yeah, that is not America First. That is Ukraine first, Israel first, Taiwan first. The hell with foreign aid. It does not do any good for anybody. Cut them off. I am also finding myself echoing the tone of Ron Paul lately, who I used to echo the tone big time between 08 and 2012 and all that.
Mm-hmm.
A striking theme across the conference and its legislative packet is focus placed on the threat from Iran, which is non-existent. In AIPAC's talking points, Hezbollah is mentioned nearly as much as Hamas, often in the same breath as proxies for Iran. An entire pamphlet from the conference is dedicated to the multi-front threat from seven different groups, not just in Gaza, but also across Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and Iraq. Iran and its terrorist proxies are waging war against the Jewish state. The pamphlet states, which is an even greater threat than Hamas. It's always about Hamas, which in 2009, there was a speech given on the House floor by Ron Paul on who created Hamas, and who funds Hamas.
And this problem goes back way before Hamas.
Yes.
So it's just totally ridiculous. And who's the one that's attacking everybody? Bombs this one, bombs that one, bombs the other one, and says, "Oh, we're defending ourselves." The problem is our
Who's the one that's been firing bombs into Syria ever since 2015 and 16? And why did Tulsi Gabbard herself go and meet with Bashar al-Assad to get to the bottom of it?
Mm-hmm.
And people don't understand, and they wanted to paint her as some kind of Assad agent because she was a member of Congress and she wanted to go see things firsthand. And
Exactly.
she's also she was also a veteran of this country. All this stuff with Israel is making more people turn nationalistic because they're fed up with our money being sent over there while we get nothing.
Now
we get nothing.
So you have all these people of Congress, you read their names, and they're meeting with the lobbyists for Israel. We've seen them how many times they take trips over to Israel. They sit and talk with Netanyahu, but that's all fine. But if Tulsi Gabbard or anybody else visits Syria or any other place, or even if you went over to Iran to talk with them, they'd have a fit. But it's okay to sit there with Netanyahu. And they
made a shitting connection because Jill Stein was in a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and they also made a shitting fit over Tulsi Gabbard going over to meet with Bashar al-Assad. Isn't that what a nation's leader is supposed to do, is go and meet with these leaders of these countries?
Yes, that's what they're supposed to do. It's here you have AIPACs dictating who enemies are supposed to be. But meanwhile, the big problem is the Israeli regime. That entity is the problem. Not wanting to get along with their neighbors, wanting to take over the whole region with the Greater Israel Plan.
Exactly. And even, I was reading back here a few months ago. This is also hurting migrant workers that work in that region, especially in countries like Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt. And especially in Syria and Lebanon, where the Philippine government had to pull all overseas Filipino workers out because of this.
Mm-hmm.
So this has hurt many national economies that rely on these remittances to lift their economies. AIPAC has long lobbied for more hawkish measures against Iran, but its talking points that it's now using the October 7th attacks and the current war as a pretext to push for greater U.S. involvement against the Islamic Republic. Other than military funding for Israel, the main pieces of legislation AIPAC is supporting both entail stronger actions to cut Iran off from the global economy, which it pushes them into the arms of Russia and China. Those are the Iranian Sanctions Enforcement Act and the SHIP Act, which would crack down on foreign ports and refineries that process petroleum exported from Iran in violation of existing U.S. sanctions. The SHIP Act passed the House in early November. AIPAC's hopes to see Iran's economy crippled through sanctions as a means of drying up Iran's support for Hezbollah, which they have no proof that Iran supported Hezbollah or Hamas. There is no proof of that.
Right.
Which they seem to think they will give Israel the upper hand in a conflict that many see as imminent. That's not giving them the upper hand. That's actually putting their national security even at further risk. That's putting our national security at risk. Even Scott Ritter and that dude MacArthur said
McGregor.
That. Yeah. McGregor. AIPAC's push for these actions come as the war in Gaza threatens to escalate into a regional war. Recently, Israel has exchanged rocket fire with the Shiite political party Hezbollah along its northern border with Lebanon, where the IDF reports it assassinated a key Hamas target. If Hezbollah and Israel go directly to war, it will pull other Arab nations and put pressure on the U.S. to back its closest ally in the region, which I don't see them as an ally. I see them more or less as what's the term I'm looking for? Collateral?
Yeah.
It puts us more at risk of even nuclear war, which should be prevented. The documents further emphasize U.S. involvement by highlighting the 3 Army troops killed in January in a drone strike on a base in Jordan, which officials have linked to Iran. Yeah, which I doubt they have proof that Iran did that, which there doesn't seem to be any evidence reciting their claims. There is a repeated tactic we've seen where there's more attention on Israel's military actions against Palestinians and the occupation. The government pivots to fears about Iran, said Duss. At the beginning of the war, there was immediate speculation that Iran and China gave Hamas directives to carry out the October 7th attacks, though those claims were still unfounded. As public perception shifts against Israel, potentially pulling U.S. policy with it, AIPAC appears poised to drum up more threats about Iran's role in the war, which they have not presented any sort of evidentiary support.
They haven't. And the proof is that basically Iran is independent. It's that these groups are independent themselves. That these are resistance groups resisting acts that are done to them by Israel. You know, Israel has been bombing into Lebanon, in his Hezbollah territory, for a while now.
And what they fail to realize, these attacks are unprovoked. Syria is not provoking Israel. Lebanon is not provoking Israel. Jordan is not provoking them. Iraq has not provoked them. These are unjustifiable attacks against neighboring countries just because
they want to start something is what they want to do, or then claim they're the victim.
Yeah, they'll play foul and cry like a little bitch.
Exactly. That's what they do all the time. And as we see, they're having a fit because people don't like what they're doing, what they've been doing in the West Bank, what they've been doing in Gaza. And they somehow, they're fine with all that. Thinking it's, people should just stand with them as they terrorize and ethnically cleanse an area. And people are just supposed to be fine with that. As we know with the Greater Israel Plan, they are trying to wipe out Palestine, and they'll continue on with Jordan and Lebanon. And
go all the way between
Syria.
The Tigris and Euphrates River. Like what Joe Logan just said, correct, is Iran is not our enemy. We are our own enemy by not fighting back. We are completely complicit. Yes, we are complicit in the illegal invasion in Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen. What other countries have we hit over there?